The night air felt ordinary. College campuses, quiet streets, and suburban homes across America all seemed safe. But hiding behind that sense of normalcy was a man who didn't fit the image of a monster. He was charming, educated, even likable. His name was Ted Bundy, and for years, he moved unnoticed through society while committing some of the most chilling crimes in modern history. This isn't just a story about what he did. It's about how he got away with it for so long, and the haunting questions that still linger. In the early 1970s, young women began disappearing across Washington state. At first, there was no clear connection. Different locations, different circumstances, but one unsettling similarity: they all seemed to vanish without a trace. Friends described seeing a polite man with an arm cast asking for help. Others mentioned a stranger who seemed harmless, even attractive. That man was Ted Bundy. Born in 1946, Bundy's early life appeared complicated but not outwardly alarming. He was intelligent, ambitious, and capable of blending in. He studied psychology, volunteered on a political campaign, and even worked at a crisis hotline. The idea that someone like him could be responsible for a string of disappearances felt almost impossible to investigators at the time. But the pattern grew. In 1974, multiple women vanished within months of each other. Witnesses began recalling the same name being used, Ted. A brown Volkswagen Beetle was also mentioned repeatedly. That detail would later become one of the most critical clues in identifying him. Despite these leads, Bundy remained free. He moved from Washington to Utah, and the disappearances followed. In Utah, the crimes escalated. Victims were abducted in broad daylight, sometimes from crowded areas. It was bold, calculated, and terrifying. Authorities began to suspect they were dealing with a single perpetrator operating across state lines, something law enforcement at the time wasn't fully equipped to handle. By 1975, Bundy was finally arrested during a routine traffic stop. Officers found suspicious items in his car, including handcuffs and tools that didn't match his explanation. He was charged with kidnapping, and while the evidence was circumstantial, it was enough to bring him into custody. But even then, the full scope of his crimes was far from understood. Bundy represented himself in court, a move that shocked many but also revealed his confidence and need for control. He escaped from custody not once, but twice. The first escape happened in Colorado when he jumped from a courthouse window. He was recaptured days later, but the second escape was far more alarming. He managed to slip through a hole in his jail cell ceiling and disappeared completely. What happened next would cement his place in history as one of the most dangerous criminals ever captured. After escaping, Bundy traveled to Florida, where his behavior became even more reckless. In January 1978, he entered a sorority house at Florida State University. What followed was a brutal attack that shocked the nation. For the first time, there was undeniable physical evidence linking him to the crime. If you're finding this story gripping so far, take a moment to subscribe to Shadow Files. There are more cases like this that reveal just how complex and unsettling the human mind can be. Bundy's time in Florida didn't last long. He was arrested again shortly after, following a suspicious encounter with police. This time, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Witness testimony, physical evidence, and forensic analysis all pointed directly to him. The trial became a media spectacle, one of the first to be heavily televised, giving the public a front-row seat to his behavior. He continued to represent himself, often appearing calm and composed, even as the details of his crimes were revealed. It was this contrast that fascinated and disturbed people the most. How could someone who looked so normal be capable of such acts? The prosecution presented bite mark evidence, a controversial but compelling piece at the time, linking Bundy to one of the victims. Combined with eyewitness accounts and his own suspicious actions, it was enough for the jury. In 1979, Ted Bundy was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. But even after his conviction, the story didn't end. Bundy began giving interviews, offering partial confessions, often withholding details unless it benefited him. He spoke about his crimes in vague terms, sometimes blaming external influences, sometimes distancing himself entirely. It created a confusing narrative, one that left investigators questioning how many victims there truly were. Officially, Bundy confessed to 30 murders, but many believe the number is much higher. The lack of complete records and his manipulation of information means the full extent may never be known. Some cases remain unsolved to this day, potentially connected to him but never confirmed. One of the coldest aspects of this case lies in those unanswered questions. How many victims were there? Were there accomplices, or did he truly act alone? And perhaps most chilling of all, how did he manage to evade capture for so long despite leaving behind clues? The Volkswagen Beetle, the use of his real name, the repeated patterns of behavior. In hindsight, these seem like obvious mistakes. But at the time, law enforcement agencies lacked the communication systems we have today. Information didn't travel quickly between states, allowing Bundy to continue his crimes across jurisdictions without being immediately connected. There's also the psychological element. Bundy didn't fit the stereotype people expected. He wasn't visibly threatening. He was articulate, educated, and capable of gaining trust quickly. That ability allowed him to approach victims without raising suspicion, making his methods even more dangerous. As investigators pieced together his movements, they began to understand just how calculated he was. He studied his surroundings, adapted his tactics, and exploited weaknesses in the system. It wasn't just about opportunity. It was about strategy. Then come the theories. Some believe Bundy's crimes were driven by a need for control, rooted in deep psychological issues from his childhood. Others suggest that his behavior escalated over time, starting with fantasies that eventually turned into real-world actions. There's also debate about whether his intelligence made him more dangerous, allowing him to manipulate both people and situations to his advantage. Another theory focuses on his confessions. In his final days before execution, Bundy began revealing more details, but many experts believe he still held back information. Was it a final attempt to maintain control? Or was it fear of fully confronting what he had done? There's even speculation about whether Bundy influenced other criminals. His case received massive media attention, and some argue that it may have unintentionally inspired others seeking notoriety. It raises uncomfortable questions about how crime is reported and consumed by the public. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida. Outside the prison, crowds gathered, some celebrating, others simply witnessing history. It marked the end of his life, but not the end of the mystery surrounding his crimes. What makes this story linger isn't just the number of victims or the details of the crimes. It's the realization that someone could live among us, appearing completely ordinary, while hiding something so dark beneath the surface. And that's the unsettling truth. Evil doesn't always look the way we expect it to. If this story made you think, or if it left you with questions, make sure to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Bundy told the full truth before his execution? Or are there still secrets buried with him? Subscribe to Shadow Files for more deep dives into the world's most chilling cases. Because sometimes, the scariest stories are the ones that are real.